Amnesia, as we all know, means to forget. The antithesis to amnesia is thus anamnesis, meaning to remember, linked to Platonic philosophy, where the soul recalls or remembers the knowledge it had before one was born or reborn. In our prior video, where we talked about the Chamber of Guff, we linked Layla, the angel of conception, to Crowley's Layla and Job 29:3. It is Layla who both teaches and erases all of the wisdom of the world before one is born. In our last video, we discussed the significance of rivers and bridges and how they could be tied to death and rebirth. As the user Shields3654 noted, the Nehi Chao, which is the bridge of forgetfulness or helpfulness, is the bridge one must cross before reincarnation, where they must drink Meng Po's soup, the soup of oblivion, though sometimes translated as the five-flavored tea of forgetfulness, which causes them to forget their previous lives and sins before they are reborn. And so we can see how this archetype presents itself both from an Eastern and Western perspective. But why is this so? We must remember that to Jung, all of this is tied to our collective unconscious. Furthermore, to Plato, the soul suffered from amnesia due to the trauma of being born in a material reality, separated from the true reality of the immaterial or ideal forms. To Plato, reasoning and philosophy could lead to anamnesis, linked to the Gnostic and Neoplatonic form of awakening, where one obtains their needed gnosis. It would be Kant that would note the limitations of reason, however, with his new mental will. We could further link this sense of amnesia due to trauma, as Plato noted, with something like Freudian repression, where one represses things too traumatic for them to psychically accept, shifting these thoughts or memories from their conscious to their unconscious. And so, to those like Crowley, Deleuze, via schizoanalysis, where we do not repress desire, to people like Jung and Land, there comes the need to conjure these demonological aspects of the unconscious and uproot them from their psychic or virtual states so as to actualize them in reality, allowing for change to occur or becoming other. However, it makes sense why amnesia would be linked to the death and rebirth process. When we correlate death with the Tarot's 13th card of the Major Arcana, we link it to Crowley's Knight of Pan, where the act symbolizes a spiritual death of sorts, the turning over of a new leaf, as it were. Thus, one must forget their old ways in order to embrace new ones, similar to how, as noted in a Buddhist or Taoist parable, a hand that is full of objects must let go or empty their hands of said objects if they are to grasp at or obtain anything new. Thus, this emptiness or form of wuji is key to finding one's flow. And so for Deleuze, Jung, and Crowley, the death and rebirth process endlessly repeats via the body without organs, or the Algoides, a Neoplatonic term for the higher self, or, of course, one's guardian angel. We must remember that the word forget etymologically goes back to vergeten, which, in addition to failing to remember, also means failing to do something, linked to a specific action one undertakes. For example, mentally forgetting to turn off the lights is linked to not turning off the lights physically. As we have noted numerous times already with speech act theory or magic spells, we can even call it telekinesis if we wanted to be poetic, or ideological discourse. Thoughts, driven by discourse, and therefore memory, are fundamentally linked to all of our actions. We talked about how Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory, was linked to the 9 muses. Her name is linked etymologically to Nemi, which means to remember, where the Proto-Indo-European root men means to think. Thus, opposed to Neme is the word Nemo, which we said was tied to, like the word utopia from Moore's novel, it means no place or nowhere, or more specifically, no man, since Nemo breaks down to ni, meaning no, and homo, meaning man or human. Nemo is linked to Odysseus, since it was the false name he used to fool the Cyclops in Homer's The Odyssey. Ulysses was thus, of course, no man, right? So as we talked about with Culp's Dark Deleuze, we are turning the now here into nowhere, based on Deleuze's comments on Samuel Butler's satirical utopian novel, Erewhon, which is an anagram for nowhere. Thus, the act of transforming or transmuting now here into nowhere is linked to the act of becoming other in Deleuze's philosophy. We must remember that to Deleuze, man and machine are linked symbiotically, as men are desiring machines, using desire to morph or change into something other with the machine's symbiotic assistance, akin to how Eddie Brock and the Venom symbiote alien function together as one in the Spider-Man universe, which is fitting since Venom acts as both a poison and a cure, akin to the pharmacon tied to demonology and alchemy too, as we know with the Vade Retro Satana, and of course the Hermetic Green Lion. The nowhere is the virtual, while the now here is the actual, and like demonology, the whole point is to make the virtual actual, done to land in the grip of the nun via hyperstitional demonology. Like the Eminem song, one knocks on the doorway, a liminal space to let the devil, the noumenal or unconscious alien from the outside, in, as it were. We can further see connections to Nick Land's refusal for the Gnostic belief of knowing via not just his advocacy for Kant's noumenon, but also for his disdain for all things human. Land, thus via nihility, believes more in Nemo than in Neme in some sense. Land advocates not for men, but for the machine, where the machines evolve onward from the machine-man symbiosis, leaving man behind. As noted in the manga, Ghost in the Shell 2, Man-Machine Interface, any understanding about AI will soon need to be understood in a religious sense by mankind. Furthermore, Land cannot believe in knowing, since it cuts ties off with Kant's noumenon. To escape Burroughs' one-god universe, one needs the outside in order to flee the eternal and closed cycle, via the open spiral associated with hyperstition, time travel, and demonology. On top of this, if we consider the necessary act of being reborn the act of forgetting what we once knew, then if one is to be reborn endlessly, as Deleuze's philosophy calls for, it would require a lot of amnesia, more so for man than the machine due to mnemonics. In a way, amnesia seems to be linked to the deterritorialization process, the death of our old self, or the oblivion of Meng Po's soup. Oppositely, anamnesis would thus be connected with remembering what we forgot, tied closer to reterritorialization, which Land despises. We can further relate this to Prometheus and his twin brother Epimetheus. Prometheus is akin to the Antichrist, a Gnostic figure whose name means forethought, associated with thinking and reasoning. Meanwhile, it is Epimetheus who opens Pandora's box of horrors due to his lack of thinking skills, since his name means afterthought. We have noted on this channel many times on how Land's philosophy closely aligns with an Epimethean mindset. Again, we must remember that like Abrahadabra or 11 or the Lobster God or Machinic Desire, we are dealing with dual forms of power or articulation, a magical formula, meaning we can, 1, turn utopias, the virtual nowhere, into actual dystopian now-heres, or 2, we can do the opposite and turn dystopian now-heres into new virtual nowheres that can be actualized by way of death and rebirth, or phrased another way, by the act of deterritorialization and reterritorialization, or, more simplistically stated, by the acts of amnesia and anamnesis. As noted by the magician's card in the tarot, the magician points both above and below, unifying the two concepts paradoxically to endlessly create, as noted by the infinity symbol that rests above his head as if a halo. Again, occult masters prove the most favorable of philosophers, I find. Their knowledge is old, but it is always acting on the cutting edge, made seemingly immortal due to the archetypal predisposition of the human mindset. Forgotten for a time before it is remembered or reborn or refashioned unknowingly for the future, reforged in the alchemist's crucible, where crucible etymologically comes from crux, meaning cross, tied to both Christ and the crossroads, Hecate's doorways, and liminal spaces of dual power, or the crossing of rivers, akin to Styx, or again, as Sherrill's 3654 noted, can be connected to the Wangchong River of forgetfulness, where one drinks its waters, forgetting, so as to get beyond the underworld or abyss, and be reborn or reincarnated anew as something other than what it once previously was.